Okay, everyone, thanks for coming this afternoon. Today we're going to be discussing a very hot topic, which is how do we get our buyers' offers accepted in this crazy seller's market that we are seeing. So obviously you have probably had discussions about this with other realtors. You may have listened to podcasts or coaches, read articles online. So I thought it would just be helpful to kind of compile all of that information into one class. And the goal is that hopefully there's maybe one or two new things that you're going to walk away with today in your arsenal. All right, so hopefully everybody can see my screen. I just have some slides to share with you, and then obviously we'll discuss each one in more detail. So first up is, hold on. What are the 10 things that we can do to get our buyers' offers accepted? Okay, so this is just, a summary of what we're going to cover today. So the first item is remove as many contingencies as you possibly can. Help your buyer pick the best mortgage option. See if you can convert your mortgage buyer to a cash buyer. Use an escalation clause. Be flexible with closing date and possession. Have the buyer cover some or all of your seller's closing or moving costs. Offer seller coverage with a home warranty. Be detail-oriented, have a discussion with the listing agent, and how you can be an asset and not an obstacle. Okay, so first let's discuss contingencies. So here are the top contingencies that you're going to run into with the contract. The very first one we have here in New Jersey is attorney review. So if you have a discussion with your buyer and you have taken the time to explain the contract in detail in advance, you may be able to get them to agree to remove the attorney review period so that you can get started with the rest of the transaction immediately. You can move up your inspection period and all of that good stuff. Next most common one is the loan contingency. So if your buyer is using a mortgage to purchase their home, you may want to have a discussion with the mortgage lender to see if they offer a program where the buyer can actually get to the mortgage commitment level, meaning they're already through underwriting, before they even make an offer. That obviously makes their offer look much stronger and removes some of the worry on the seller side that they may run into possible issues with the financing. The biggest one that we deal with as realtors is the inspection contingencies. And we are obviously seeing buyers that are waiving these completely. That's one option, but if you or your buyer is not comfortable waiving the inspections, you can still offer an as-is sale, and instead of waiving them completely, you can either write in a cap on necessary repairs, something like, the buyer will not ask for repairs unless in excess of however much, say $2,000, on specific items. And I would detail that you're keeping that to necessary systems like environmental, structural, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, etc. You can also have the buyer offer to pay for inspection fees that would normally be paid by the seller. So those are things like either, paying for the well test or just paying the fee for the CO, right? You're not committing to those repairs necessarily, but you're saying, hey, I will at least pay that upfront cost for you. Next one, and one that's a little harder to get around, is the home sale contingency. So if you have a buyer that, is selling a home in preparation for buying a new home, there may be a few things you can do to try to remove that contingency. So first is obviously have a discussion with your buyer to see if they have someplace they can go on a temporary basis so that they can actually complete the sale of their home before buying a new home. Another thing you can do is actually speak with the mortgage lender. I've actually come across this personally with some of my clients where even though they had a home to sell, they were qualified enough that they could get a new mortgage that was not contingent upon selling their current home. So that's always worth having a conversation with your buyer and your lender to see if that's a possibility. Next up is the appraisal contingency. In some circumstances, your buyer can waive the appraisal completely, or they can offer an appraisal gap guarantee. And that can either be the entire difference, right? So if they're offering $265,000 on a home that is priced at $250,000, that's a $15,000 difference. They can offer to cover the full $15,000, or they can offer to cover whatever portion of that they are comfortable doing. Now, when we're dealing with some of these contingencies, if your buyer is choosing to waive or alter them, you always want to look into what appropriate forms you may need to get them to sign. They may need to sign a waiver if they are foregoing home inspections or an appraisal, something like that. So, do your homework, make sure that you are getting them to put in writing to cover your butts about anything that they are waiving. Okay, now we're going to talk about mortgages. So if you have a buyer who has to use a mortgage, there are still some things you can do to sort of mitigate that. So have a discussion with your buyer and their lender about what their options are. Oftentimes they may get approved for different types of loans. And you want to explain to your buyer that if they're given a choice, conventional is most likely the way to go. Now, if they can only use FHA, USDA, or VA, you want to make sure that you are prepared to explain not only to your buyer, but to the listing agent or seller what that type of loan entails and sort of manage their expectations. Lots of sellers or listing agents may have, thoughts in their head that aren't necessarily true about these types of loans. So you sort of want to act as the myth buster in this circumstance and make sure you're giving them the appropriate information so that that type of loan isn't so scary. And if you are using one of these loans, you want to speak with your buyer about the possibility of them offering either a larger escrow deposit to show that they're serious and are using this loan for convenience and not for lack of funds, or a larger than necessary down payment. For instance, they may get an FHA loan at 3.5%, but maybe they can put down as much as 10%. So that's, two things that you can also offer. Oops. Sorry, hold on. There we go. All right. So another thing that we're seeing, buyers are still using are grants, specifically the New Jersey HFMA grant. So if they are using that grant in your offer, you want to detail whether the sale is contingent upon the buyer obtaining that grant final approval from the state or not. Some buyers may need that $10,000 in order to afford the home that they are putting an offer on. Other buyers may not need the loan or the grants. They're just, applying for it because of course it would be fabulous to have an extra $10,000, right? So you want to let the listing agent and the seller know that in that circumstance, even if they, for some reason, do not get final approval from the state, they can still move forward with that transaction. Same thing where if they absolutely cannot afford to finalize the purchase as you have offered, you need to make sure that they are aware that that is a contingency. You also, if you don't know, you want to be aware that there are options when it comes to the grant. There are both FHA and conventional mortgages available in tandem with that grant. So talk to your mortgage lender about those options. You want to also ensure that your buyer is prepared and knows what is required of them in order to get this grant. So you want to talk to them about the class they will have to take, what documents they will need, and make sure that they are ready to go as quickly as possible once you are under contract to avoid any delays in receiving final approval for that grant. I think we all know this next one, which is the importance of using a trusted lender that you have worked with in the past. So buyers may not understand this. So part of our job is to explain to our buyers how important the role that a mortgage lender plays is going to be in their transaction. And if you have a good relationship with your mortgage lender, you can reach out to them and ask if you can get some data or graphs about their fall through rate, especially if they have a fall through rate that is much below kind of the industry average. You can present that information along with your offer to show that using this mortgage lender, your buyer has an excellent chance of making it to the closing table with no issues. You also want to speak with your mortgage lender and make sure that the loan officer, whoever you're using, is available and willing to speak directly with the listing agent should they have questions. And you can even copy them on the offer email you're sending so that they can reach out proactively to that listing agent and tell them all the good things about your buyer's financial situation. Another question that we don't often think to ask, but they do exist, is some mortgage lenders actually offer incentives that you might be able to include as part of your offer to sweeten the deal. So some might offer a closing guarantee. So that could be something where the mortgage lender says, you know, hey, if this deal doesn't go through because of something on the financing end, we will pay the seller X amount of dollars, whether it's 1,000, 5,000, whatever, regardless of whether or not this closes. So again, you're just giving the seller some assurance that everybody involved is going to make sure that this deal goes through, and that if it doesn't, they're still going to walk away with some money to make up for the time their home has been off the market. Some mortgage lenders also offer to purchase a home warranty on behalf of their buyer clients. And if that is the case, you can discuss with the mortgage lender whether you can add seller coverage to that home warranty and offer that as a benefit to the seller as well. Okay, so mortgage versus cash, right? We all wish we had cash buyers. So here are a couple points you can look at to see if there is a possibility of converting your mortgage buyer to a cash buyer. All right, so some mortgage lenders have new programs. I'm sure you've all seen emails about them flying around, where the mortgage company actually purchased the home in cash. So you're making a cash offer, and then they sort of sell it back to your buyer client with a mortgage. And they do that in a double closing, you know, pretty much back to back, same day, same time. You can also, you know, have your buyer look into bridge loans. If they currently own a home and that home has a large amount of equity, they might be able to, you know, pull out enough cash to make a purchase on the next home. You can have them look into either hard money or private loans as opposed to a mortgage. And if you are dealing with a cash offer, you want to make sure that you are presenting a very clear and clean cash offer, because there can be stumbling blocks even with a cash offer. So you want to make sure that your buyer's proof of funds covers not only the purchase price they're offering, but also has enough showing to cover closing costs. You can also offer, especially on a proposal to purchase, a closing date window. That way the sellers can pick a date they are comfortable with, and they won't feel like they have to close quickly just because it's a cash deal, right? So sometimes we think it's a good thing to say, oh, hey, my buyer can close in 2 weeks, but you also have to consider that might freak the sellers out. You know, maybe they haven't packed yet, they haven't been able to buy their new home yet. You never know really what's going on. So you want to make sure, you know, it's clear that even though it's a cash deal and you can close quickly, You can also be flexible and give the sellers more time if they need it. Okay, so another hot topic we've all probably heard about is use of an escalation clause, right? So let's talk about this for a minute. Escalation clauses can be applied to both offers and contracts once you're under contract. Because this is kind of a crazy market, you may get your buyer's offer accepted, but then you're in the attorney review period and another offer comes in, it's better than your client's offer, and the next thing you know, you're getting booted out. So don't just think about them in regards to offers. You can also offer to attach that escalation clause to the actual contract. So even after you're under contract, if another offer comes in, you'll automatically raise that purchase price to meet or beat that other offer. Now, I think we've all probably seen, agents online complaining about, people including escalation clause with offers. So that's sort of a situation you might want to feel out ahead of time. They're not going to be beneficial in every situation, and you certainly don't want to use it if you think it's going to annoy the listing agent or the seller. So do your best to kind of figure that out ahead of time. You still want to start with a very strong sales price in your offer. An escalation clause isn't going to be as attractive if you're still starting with a lowball number, right? So you should still make sure your buyer is presenting a strong sales price, but is just going the extra mile to ensure that they will pay even above that should the need arise. When you are presenting an escalation clause, make sure you fill it out completely and make the information clear. You want to detail by what increment the increases will happen, whether that's by $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, whatever the case might be. You also want to detail what is the cap? How high is your buyer willing to go? So for example, you would say, my buyer is willing to beat any other offer by $2,000 up to $260,000. There's also a little checkbox if you're using the Zip Forms escalation clause that says whether they're going to do a one-time escalation or whether they will do multiple escalations. So if you're willing to increase by 2,000 up to 260,000, you would check the box that says, multiple increases if necessary. You also want to ensure, if you're using an escalation clause, that your client's pre-approval or proof of funds covers whatever that ultimate cap number is going to be, right? So you're covering all your bases. If you're going up to 260,000 on your offer, but your pre-approval only is for 250,000, really that doesn't mean anything. So make sure you're providing the correct information up front. Don't make it harder for the listing agent that they have to pull that information out of you. You also want to make sure that both the buyer and seller understand that if they're going to utilize the escalation clause, that proof of the other offers is going to be required. So you can kind of assure your buyer, that it's not just the listing agent coming back and saying, oh yeah, it goes up to 260, so let's write the contract for that. You're going to be able to show them that other offer that came in that caused the escalation clause to be in effect. Okay. Next thing we can do is be flexible with the closing dates or dates of possession. So first thing you can do up front is read the MLS listing carefully. And you want to look to see if there are any details about what the seller's needs are. Are they contingent upon finding suitable housing? Does it say immediate possession? Does it say 30 to 90 days? If that information is not there, or if it's unclear, certainly you can reach out to the listing agent and see if you can find out from them, what time frame your sellers are working with. As I think I already mentioned earlier, you can offer a closing date window. right? So instead of putting a specific date on the proposal to purchase, you can say anytime within this 2 to 3 week period, the sellers can take their pick of what date they are comfortable with. You can also specify and point out specifically that the buyers can be flexible if the situation changes. So maybe the sellers are contingent upon finding suitable housing. They already have an accepted offer on their next home, but anything can happen. Maybe that offer falls through. You can just reassure the seller that, hey, even if your transaction doesn't work out on the other side, we would be willing to do multiple extensions if necessary. And kind of in extreme circumstances or certain situations, maybe your buyer would consider doing a lease back to the sellers. So if we think about it, when your buyers purchase the property, they're paying their first month's mortgage up front. That means they're not making another payment until at least the following month. So really, if needed, they could even offer to let the sellers stay in the home for up to 1 month without any compensation. Now, obviously, there are potential pitfalls with this. So you want to be very clear on the terms. You want it to be in writing. And by all means, get a lawyer to help you out if you think it's necessary. Okay. Next big thing we can do is offer to cover some or all of the seller's closing or moving costs, right? So as part of your offer, you can say, hey, my buyer will actually pay all of the seller's closing costs. You can also offer just a specific number, like buyer is willing to give $5,000 towards seller's closing costs, or they can offer to cover certain specific fees, such as the title fees, transfer tax, the buyer's broker commission, or unpaid taxes or utility bills. Okay. Home warranties. I think this may be a slightly underutilized option in our industry. So especially through our company, we have access to great home warranty programs, which offers sellers coverage. So this shouldn't be used just when you have a listing. You should also think about it when you're representing a buyer. If your buyer is planning on purchasing a home warranty for their property anyway, you can explain to them that when you order that home warranty on their behalf, you can add coverage for the seller. And there's usually just a small additional fee for that, $50, $60, something like that. So if you get them to do that, you can include a copy of the brochure for the home warranty company with your offer, explaining that the buyer will pay to have the seller be covered until the closing date. They can read through the brochure to see what is covered and also kind of what the cost is, because that way they know how much extra money your buyer is willing to spend to make this deal happen. It's also going to provide peace of mind to both the buyer and the seller when it comes to dealing with repairs that might pop up. Obviously, it's not going to cover everything, but as an example I can give you, I had a transaction where I was using this. The air conditioning, the central air, quit right in the middle of the transaction. We were able to use the warranty. The seller thought they were going to have to cancel the deal because they couldn't afford to fix it and the buyer wouldn't want to take possession, but warranty came out. It wound up being way less expensive. Sellers were able to get it done and we got to the closing table as planned. And if you are offering sellers coverage, the buyer can go one step further and say, hey, we understand that if you do need to use this, there's going to be a service fee involved that the seller will have to pay. We will reimburse you at closing for any service fees that you shell out if using this becomes necessary. And you also want to make sure that both the buyer and seller understand that if the deal does fall apart, even if they have used the home warranty, they will not be charged. Okay, so the last couple things we're going to talk about are really more general, and not so much, dealing with details of an offer, but what we can do as agents to make sure that we are putting our best foot forward, and that we are doing everything in our power to make sure that the transaction is going to go as smooth as possible. So the first thing that I want to discuss is being detail oriented. It's very important that we provide clear, consistent, and complete information when we're making an offer. So usually the first thing you want to do is find out whether the listing agent prefers the proposal to purchase or contracts. Lots of times you'll even see this in the notes to agent in the MLS, right? Like, I only want to see a one-page proposal to purchase. Fine, that's great. However, if your buyer is working in an area that doesn't use proposal to purchase, you don't want to be the agent that's sending them one. You want to make sure that if they're used to going to contracts, that's what you're using for your offer. When you are filling out a proposal to purchase, you want to make sure that you're providing all the necessary information that that listing agent will need in order to complete the contracts should they accept your offer. Again, we want to make their job as easy as possible. So even if there isn't a spot on the proposal to purchase to fill out this information, refer to your contracts and make sure you're checking off all those boxes and including information like your license number, the company's license numbers, the buyer's home address, if it's not on their pre-approval, any information that they need to fill out the contract that isn't on there. You're saving them the step of tracking you down afterwards, and it makes you look good, obviously. So another kind of point is to make sure that your buyer's pre-approval is up to date, right? You don't want it to be 30 days out, but as close to the offer date as possible is great. And you want to make sure that it's specific. I've received as a listing agent some pre-approvals from companies that might as well be toilet paper. Like, there's no specifics on it. I don't know what they're talking about. It doesn't detail how much they're putting down, what type of loan it is. So please make sure, if you're working with a good lender, this shouldn't be a concern, but you always want to look at the pre-approval before sending it. Make sure the date on it is correct. Make sure that all of the necessary information, such as what type of loan, how long the loan is for, what the down payment percentage is, etc. Make sure that's all on there. And I always try to use a kind of change tactics on this, right? I used to try to get a pre-approval for the exact amount that my buyer was offering because I didn't want to tip their hand and send a pre-approval for 300,000 if they were only offering 250, right? So I used to get a new pre-approval for whatever the exact amount of the offer is. I've kind of changed my thoughts on that now, given this market, and I try to send a pre-approval for slightly above whatever sales price we're offering so that the seller already has that assurance, that we can go up if necessary. Something else you can do that maybe you haven't thought about is have your buyer already have an escrow check ready to go. Okay. Are there maybe problems with this? Sure. Maybe you don't know exactly who it should be made out to, but chances are pretty good, 90% of the time it's going to be held by the buyer's title company or buyer's brokerage. So I think it's worth the risk to have them have it right up front so that you can send a photo or copy of that escrow check with your offer. You are showing that that buyer is ready to go and that the second that contract is offered, that escrow is going to be deposited and there. We are seeing lots of situations. I think Lisa Payne, the manager from the Washington Township office, brought this up at one of the meetings, that we're kind of seeing situations where contracts are signed, but the escrow deposit isn't showing up, for 5 to 7 days afterwards. Just avoid that, have it done up front, prove that that buyer is on top of things and ready to go. And finally, when you're sending your offer, I think it's best if you can, in a clear but kind of cordial way, point out the main parts of your offer, sort of write a summary of what your offer entails. And if there are any additional provisions that are included in that offer, make sure that they are explained in full. So we all know when we're using the proposal to purchase, there's not that much room in this section. So you may have to abbreviate or shove things in there. So you want to make sure that you also include in the body of the email or, an attached page to the proposal to purchase, how you're going to want those additional provisions to be written into the contract, right? So don't leave it up to the listing agent to play a guessing game as to how the appraisals gap is going to work or how the home inspections are going to work. You can write out kind of in full explanation, any details for any additional provisions to make sure that they're clear. And we're seeing more and more agents are using kind of these online offer platforms where you have to submit your offer online. Everyone that I've used, I've seen a note section where you can provide that same information. If for whatever reason you can't, don't hesitate to send an follow-up email directly to that listing agent that again kind of introduces yourself, summarizes the offer, and always offer that you're available to explain anything further or answer any questions if need be. All right, communication. We all know communication is key during a transaction. So I want all of us to put our best foot forward and sort of take the higher road, so to speak, when it comes to dealing with the co-op agent. So whenever possible, try to get them on the phone. Some you won't be able to, right? Roll with the punches. But if you can, have a conversation with that listing agent. You're showing them that you are more than willing to talk on the phone. You are available. You're going to make time for them. You're dedicated to making sure your client is represented and that information is coming through, as quickly as possible, that you are very communicative and easy to talk to. Love letters, right? We all know the drama surrounding this. So even though you should not have your buyers actually provide a love letter, and most listing agents now are advising those sellers not to look at them even if they are presented, you can still have a conversation with the listing agent about your buyers. So obviously you need to be careful. There is certain information that you really shouldn't talk about because it falls under those same fair housing or anti-discrimination laws. And you certainly want to make sure that you have permission from your buyer to discuss, anything specific. But what are some things you can talk about? Well, you can talk about how you know that buyer, how long you've been working with them, how many offers have you been, put in on their behalf? What did the buyers love about the home? Chances are, whatever you discuss, that agent probably is going to share with the seller. So whatever you can think to talk to them about is going to help humanize the situation you're both in and put a face on that offer. Okay. Also, when you're having a conversation with the listing agent, it gives you the opportunity to try to pull whatever information you can from them about what current offers they have, how many offers, what are the offers for? Yes, do they have to have permission from their seller to discuss that with you? Yep, but maybe they do. You don't know. It's certainly worth the ask. And you could also always ask in more general terms. So if they're not comfortable speaking specifics with you, you can ask general questions like, Well, hey, listen, can you just tell me, what your seller's primary focus is? Are they the most interested in getting top dollar? Are they the most worried about when they're going to have to move? How can I tailor my buyer's offer to be the best for your seller? Chances are asking general questions like that are going to get you some useful information. Okay. Finally, and last but not least, this may be a bit of a touchy subject, so please know that, none of this is aimed at anybody specific, but just something I feel is important for all of us to keep in mind. It's certainly something that is hard for me personally. So this is not a pot kettle situation. But I just think it's worth all of us to kind of take a breath and evaluate our own behavior to make sure that we are working as an asset for our client and not as an obstacle. So, what are some do's and don'ts in regards to this? So something, two things really simple that you can do up front before you're even at the offer phase is you can use the showing time function to alert the sellers when you're done with the showing. So if you know that a home is occupied, which you should know from, scheduling the showing and the showing instructions, and let's say that there's, multiple dogs on the property, so showings are only at a certain time because the sellers have to remove the dogs. Listen, if you have a 45-minute appointment scheduled and you're done in 15, click on that showing time link in the text message, press the big bar that says alert sellers that you finished, and you're probably going to earn some goodwill. And they might remember, hey, that agent actually let me know that I could come home and I didn't have to walk my dogs in the pouring rain for half an hour. The flip side of that is once you've completed the showing, if you get a feedback request from the listing agent, fill it out. Be as complete as you can, compliment the home, think of something you can say about what your buyers liked, fill that out immediately, and thank the sellers for accommodating your buyer's showing. Again, you're kind of doubling up on showing both the seller and the listing agent that you're a professional agent and that you're going above and beyond to be communicative. Next point is the one I'm sure we've all struggled with from time to time, myself included. There's always the potential that you're going to wind up co-oping with an agent that doesn't work the same way that you do, that may do some things that frustrate you. All that you can do in that situation is control how you act, right? So make your best attempt to be polite and personable, no matter what the circumstances. Try to assure that agent that you are willing to make this transaction as smooth as possible. So even if it's difficult circumstances, you've hit a snag, whatever the case might be, just keep pushing forward, keep working your best, and just stay polite the entire time because, causing more frustration isn't going to fix whatever the problem is. You can also, when you're making an offer, kind of, show that up front. Maybe you have some references or thank yous from other agents you've co-opted with in the past. Hey, doesn't hurt. Send that to an agent when you're putting in an offer. Say, hey, these are agents I've worked with in the past. We had a successful transaction. Here's what they had to say about working with me. I'll make sure that, my deal with you just goes just as smoothly. You can also tell that other agent, I'm more than willing to do this for you. If we wind up working together, I will absolutely leave you a review or send you a thank you detailing how great you were to work with. And if you do have a co-op agent that you've enjoyed working with, follow up with that agent. Send them a thank you, a little, Dunkin' Donuts gift card, phone call, whatever the case might be. Building goodwill with other agents out there is only ever going to help you. because chances are you're going to be putting in an offer on that agent's property again in the future. If they already know you and know you were fantastic to work with, guess what? That's probably going to be in the back of their minds. And even though ultimately it's the seller's decision on what offer they take, you better believe that agent is going to say something to the effect of, oh, I've done a deal with this agent before. She or he was fantastic. And finally, again, something I think we all slip up on time to time. It's important to keep your frustrations to yourself and off of social media. We all have a need to vent. We all have things that are our pet peeves that tick us off, that we get tired of dealing with. Like, oh my God, why can't these listing agents just tell us when the offer has been received? It takes 1 minute. Why can't they send that email? Well, if you think about it, if you're blasting that out all over social media, and you're complaining about listing agents and you're doing it enough that other agents are taking notice, what happens when a listing agent is seeing an offer come in from you, right? Are they maybe wondering what it's going to be like to work with you if you're constantly complaining? So just something to keep in mind about how we can make sure that we're not creating a problem. Even though it really shouldn't directly affect a transaction, you just never know. So let's be careful. Okay, so that was all of the information I wanted to get through. So let me stop sharing my screen and hop back on video with all of you so that we can sort of have hi everyone, so that we can have a question and answer session if you have questions or want more details on anything I talked about, or if you have a tip or a trick that I didn't cover, by all means, please feel free to share with the class. So you can either unmute yourself, raise your hand, drop it in the chat, but floor is open to all of you now. Anyone?
Corey, I thought that it's Lisa. I thought that last thing that you put out there with using showing time to say, hey, I'm gone, to let those sellers back in, because it's crazy right now because the sellers are constantly out, whether they're sitting in their cars or, stalking the neighborhood or just waiting for all the showings. If you're out of there early, absolutely use that feature and say, hey, loved it, I'm out, and then let them get back in. But the social media postings, we see a lot of things about agents, ranting and doing different things on social media. I mean, and that people remember that, right? So if you're complaining about the MLS, Bright, or other agents, and you're posting it out there, people absolutely remember that. And you don't want to be that agent that they say, hey, that Lisa Payne put some crap out there on social media. I don't want to work with her, right? So that it's always that you want to build somebody up, support somebody, because it's hard for everyone out there. But if agents can remember that, be the agent that everybody wants to work with, because that will give you a step up in this crazy market that, we're in right now, right?
Yep.
So that was a good thing to point out. Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. I have a quick story that actually relates to everything that you just brought up and kind of what made it occur to me that this is something that maybe we're not utilizing, where I had that exact situation where I had to schedule a showing for my buyers at a property that had just had 2 open houses, but my buyers work on the weekends and couldn't make it to the open house. So I made sure that even though I was scheduling an appointment, that it was within the time frame the sellers needed. It had been pointed out in the showing instructions that they had 2 large dogs that they needed to remove, that there was cats on the property, etc. When we showed up, of course, it was raining. I get there early. I watch the sellers come out with the dogs, and they all load into their car, and they did pull off, but probably just around the corner. So as I'm taking my buyers through, I'm keeping track of how much time we're spending, and we were in and out of there in 15 minutes. So as soon as I get back to the car, I sent the alert to the sellers that we were done with the showing. And I actually sat there as soon as I got the feedback request and filled that out with a note included to the listing agent to please thank the sellers for taking the time to let us come see it, since my buyers were unavailable for the open house, right? Maybe an hour later, a couple hours later, I got a phone call from that listing agent who said, hey, I was actually with the sellers when you sent that showing time alert that you guys were done, because we were waiting till they could put the dogs back in the house so I could go show them some properties. So not only did the buyer get that alert, show the listing agent also got the feedback, called me up and said, hey, thanks so much for doing that. And also, thanks for picking up the phone. Agents don't talk to each other anymore. I can't believe you answered when I called you. We wound up having probably a 20 to 30 minute discussion. I was able to find out how many offers they had, basically what the offers were without going into too much detail, and what my buyer needed to do in order to really compete with those other offers. That's an offer I have in right now that I'm waiting to hear back on. So how much that'll help me is yet to be determined, but it certainly didn't hurt to garner that goodwill with the sellers and the other agent. I saw somebody had a hand up previously. Where were you? Do it again.
I think it was Lisa Hanley.
Lisa, you on here? Did you have a question or a comment? Nope, not seeing it now. Lisa, you're muted. So if you're trying to talk, unmute yourself. All right. Guess not. Anybody else have anything before I let you guys get out of here 10 minutes early? Nope. Okay, well, as always, this was recorded. I will send you all the link to the class recording on my YouTube channel as soon as it's done uploading. Sometimes it takes a day or so. If you have any questions about what was covered in here, use all the resources available to you, reach out to me. Oh, Lisa, she's back. All right, Lisa, shoot. Your hand is raised, so unmute yourself.
I'm just curious if we have any office forms in case we do have to waive things like home inspection or mortgage. I know we're really not, we're I don't want to get in a bind if we have something. I don't want to write something up if we have something that's been approved by our office or the office's attorneys, if I have to waive any of those normal contingencies that we have.
Yeah, there are absolutely forms in zip forms for that purpose. So there is a home inspection waiver form. Lisa from the Washington Township office, if you're from a different office, you can check with your sales leader, but the legal department put together and sent out a form for appraisal waivers or guarantees. So that exists. So yes, there will be a form for whatever it is that you need. If you're not sure where to find it, ask your tech specialist or ask your sales leader, because I'm sure they can point you in the right direction.
I'm sure they can. Thanks, Corey.
You're welcome. All right, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'll send out the link. If you need more information or have follow-up questions, reach out to me, reach out to your office tech specialist, reach out to your sales leader. Thank you so much for coming. Hopefully you took something away from this that'll help you out in the future. And I look forward to seeing all of you next week. And hey, if you have a success story, send it to me or send it to your sales leader. If this class actually helped you, please let me know. Thanks, guys. Everyone have a good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.